Every year, you celebrate America's birthday on the wrong night. The fireworks are real. The freedom is real. But the date burned into your calendar is 2 days late, and one of the men who built this country spent the rest of his life trying to tell everyone. His name was John Adams. On the night the colonies broke from Britain, he sat down and wrote a letter promising the world would remember that day forever. He described the parades, the bonfires, the fireworks. He got every single detail right except one, the date. So why do more than 300 million people light up the sky on the 4th of July? The answer is hiding inside a vote, a letter, and a printer working through the night. Stay with it, because once you see it, you can never unsee it. Start with what you were taught. On July 4th, 1776, a room full of men in Philadelphia signed a piece of paper, and a nation was born. It is a beautiful story. Almost none of it happened on that day. Independence was never a signature. It was a vote. And the vote that mattered did not happen on the 4th. It happened on the 2nd. Go back to that summer. The colonies had been at war with Britain for over a year, but they had not yet dared to say the word out loud. Independence. To say it was treason. If they lost, the punishment was a rope. Every man in that room was risking his neck, his land, and his family. In June, a delegate from Virginia named Richard Henry Lee stood up and said the dangerous thing anyway. He proposed a resolution that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. There it was, the point of no return. Congress did not vote right away. They were terrified. They delayed for weeks, argued, counted heads, and waited for the nervous colonies to come around. Then, on July 2nd, 1776, they finally did the thing that actually severed the country from its king. They voted. 12 colonies said yes. New York sat silent, still waiting for permission from home. It came down to wavering delegations and last-minute nerve. In Delaware, the vote was tied, and a delegate named Caesar Rodney rode through 80 miles of thunderstorm overnight, arriving mud-soaked just in time to break the tie for independence. That is how close it came. And in that moment, in the eyes of every man in that room, the colonies were no longer British. The break was done. The treason was committed. There was no taking it back. John Adams felt it instantly. The very next day, July 3rd, he wrote home to his wife Abigail. And what he wrote should stop you cold. He called the 2nd day of July, 1776, the most memorable epocha in the history of America. He predicted it would be celebrated by every generation that followed as a great festival of deliverance, with pomp and parade, with games and guns and bells and bonfires and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from that day forward, forevermore. He was describing the 4th of July. He just wrote down the 2nd. So, what actually happened on the 4th? Why does that date own every flag and every firework in the country? Here is the part the holiday skips. After the colonies voted to leave on the 2nd, Congress still had to agree on how to explain it to the world. A young Virginian named Thomas Jefferson had drafted a declaration. For 2 more days, the delegates went through it line by line. They argued. They cut nearly a quarter of his words. They struck out an entire passage that condemned slavery. And on July 4th, 1776, they approved the final, edited text. That is what the 4th really is, not the day they became free, the day they finished editing the announcement. The vote created independence. The document only described it, and the date stamped across the top of that document, July 4th, 1776, became the date the whole country remembered. Why? Because it was the date that got printed. Think about how memory actually works. Almost nobody alive in 1776 ever set foot in that room. They learned about independence the way you learn about nearly everything in your life, secondhand. And here is how it reached them. On the night of July 4th, a Philadelphia printer named John Dunlap set the Declaration in type and ran copies off his press through the dark. Those copies, the Dunlap broadsides, all carried one date in bold letters across the top, the 4th. Riders galloped them out across the colonies. On July 8th, the Declaration was read aloud in public for the very first time in the yard behind the Pennsylvania State House. A crowd gathered. People who could not read heard the words spoken into the open air. Days later, George Washington had it read to his troops in New York, and the soldiers were so stirred they tore down a statue of the king and melted it into musket balls, and every copy, every reading, every retelling carried the same printed date, the 4th, the 4th, the 4th. The quiet vote on the 2nd had happened behind closed doors. The 4th was the number on the paper that everyone could see and hold and hear. So the paper won. The announcement out-remembered the event. And it gets stranger, because that famous signing scene you are picturing right now, the quill, the candlelight, the founders leaning in to put their names down together, that did not happen on the 4th either. The historian Pauline Maier spent years tracing exactly what happened in her book, American Scripture. What she found is that on July 4th, the text was approved, but almost no one signed anything. Most of the 56 signatures were not added until August 2nd, a full month later, on a fresh copy hand-lettered onto parchment. Some men signed even later than that. A few who voted for independence never signed at all. The historian Ray Raphael, who collects these founding myths for a living, says it plainly. The signing we celebrate is a scene stitched together afterward, in paintings and in memory, out of 3 different days fused into one. So the real timeline looks nothing like the holiday. The colonies voted to leave on July 2nd. They approved the explanation on July 4th. They began signing the clean copy on August 2nd. 3 separate days. We folded all 3 into one and set it on fire every summer. Now, you might be thinking the 2nd of July is the real answer. But sit with it one more moment, because even that is generous. Declaring independence and actually having it are not the same thing. On July 2nd, the colonies announced they were free. Britain disagreed with the largest army and navy on Earth. The war still had 7 years left to run. Real independence, recognized and signed by the enemy, did not arrive until the Treaty of Paris in 1783. 7 full years after the date on your calendar. So which day is America's birthday? The day they voted? The day they printed it? The day they signed it? Or the day the world finally agreed to it? The honest answer is that a nation is not born in a single afternoon. It is born slowly, through argument and through a war. And we chose one clean date to stand in for all of it. We chose the date on the press release. John Adams never made peace with that. The biographer David McCullough, who won a Pulitzer Prize for the life of Adams, described a man who carried this quiet frustration to the very end. Adams believed the 2nd was the true day, the day of the deed, and he watched his country fall in love with the 4th instead. And here is where the story turns almost impossible to believe. John Adams died on the 4th of July, 1826, the 50th anniversary to the exact day. And hundreds of miles away, on that very same afternoon, Thomas Jefferson died too. The 2 men who gave the country its words, gone within hours of each other, on the one date Adams had always insisted was wrong. The nation took it as proof the 4th was sacred. Adams, you suspect, would have seen the irony. So, look at what really happened. The day you celebrate is not the day the country became free. It is the day a document got its final edit and a printer set a number at the top, and that number traveled faster and farther than the truth ever could. That is not a flaw in the story. That is the story. Nations do not remember the silent vote in the closed room. They remember the announcement, the paper, the date you can point to. The 4th of July is not a lie. It is something more human than a lie. It is the moment a country chose to remember, instead of the moment it actually happened. So tonight, when the sky catches fire and the whole country looks up at once, you are not marking the day America was born. You are marking the day America told the world. And maybe that is the truest thing about it, because a country, like a memory, is not built from what happened. It is built from the story we keep choosing to repeat, which is exactly why, every year, you celebrate America's birthday on the wrong night.